the Prophet Muhammad, not any different to the great man that preceded him in the glorious history of mankind, the torch-bearers of human spirit, and people who have left such a profound mark on the history of mankind and promoted the only thing that was there to promote, and that is the growth of human beings through godliness and God-centricity. Isa, Jesus, look at the legacy he leaves behind. A faith of love, forgiveness, compassion. A lone man, without an army, just his own godly moral example, and impacts billion people plus. Abraham, Moses, Buddha, Ram, all these are the faces of the same godly human truth, the truth that lives deep within us. The success of these people is gauged by the impact that they have made on the human community. We see with these people that they only had that beautiful reliance on God, their own godly example, and their utmost care and devotion to the well-being of humanity. The success of these people is seen, as I said, by looking at their impact. If you look at Isa, you see him praying for his opponents upon the crucifix. If you look at Muhammad, you see him forgiving his adversaries. At the height of power, he declares, in a context that was previously one of exploitation, immorality, Arab supremacy, inferiority of women and slaves, the preference of white over black. He states at that point, as of this day, all of you are one and the same in the eyes of God. There is no preference of white over black, nor man over woman, nor a free man over a slave, nor a rich over poor, nor a learned over ignorant, nor a believer of one faith over another. How profound are these people? When the Prophet came to the community, as we have heard, they can be described as barbaric people, burying their daughters, rejoicing in human tragedy, warring factions, superstitious, having no confidence in their own abilities, people confined to the sands of Arabia, people not knowing value and worth of human life, people who could not read or write, people who rejoiced in spilling of blood. When he leaves, these beast-like men were transformed into finest creatures that region had ever observed. And that too at the loss. The whole of the missionary role witnessed the loss of only 300 plus people. From barbarians to godly people, from illiterate, from people who had no education, to people who create for us the modern scientific method of data collection and evaluation. From people confined to Arabia to the great explorers. From people who had no worth in themselves to people who contribute to a glorious civilization. What this Prophet did, and those great men before him, who were the reflection of the same truth, was they brought humanity back to the basics of believing in God and making God a center of their lives. Not a God that is promoted through the variety of theology that we have today, but the God of Abraham, of Buddha, of Moses, of Isa. That God. Today's God holds the Muslim superior to a Christian, allows the Christians to conduct crusades and to kill the Muslims, allows the Jews to kill the Palestinians in the name of God, allows the Hindus to uphold the supremacy of certain castes over others, allows the Buddhists, the most peaceful people, to kill the Muslims. This is today's God and today's theology. I talk of the God of Isa, I talk of God of Musa, I talk of God of Muhammad, I talk of God of Buddha, I talk of God of Ram, a God who is colorless, a God who is religionless, a God who is distinctionless, and yet at once He is the author of all distinctions, of all variety, of all plurality, the author of white and black, in a way that white represents the beauty of black and black conveys the beauty of white. I talk of that God, the author of plurality, and the one found in the variety of color, variety of language, variety of religion, variety of gender, variety of status. At once free of all and transcendent of all, and at once involved in all and one with all. That God was the God that they introduced within mankind, that mankind found rest with. It allowed mankind to evolve. It liberated them of their restrictions. It brought godliness to them. It made them colorless yet colorful, religionless yet people with religion. The only difference was their religions were godly religions. You see the example that Shaykh Kusuri gave to us, that he insisted that the Christians ought to pray in his mosque. Do you know why he did this? He said, this mosque is a prayer of worship of my beloved. It is not my place that I should dictate who prays in there. A Christian prays to the same God, like a child talks to the same mother in his own way. And the mother does not distinguish between one and the other. Similarly, how can God, the creator of the beauty of mother, be anything less than a mother in his own affection to his own creatures? Is it possible, Muhammad taught, that just because you call Allah God, He is any less a lover of yours and any less a God of yours than if you were to call Him Allah? He taught, call Him Allah, call Him Rahman, call Him any name. All names are ultimately His names. The faith that these people gave allowed their people to transcend limitations. And that is why we find the most godly era in mankind came immediately in the surroundings of the prophets that were supplying them with the message. What happens after that is me and you take the ownership of their message, and in their name we introduce our human insecurities and biases within their godly messages, and we make them what they have become today. I take pride in saying I'm not a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or a Buddhist. Call me by any of those religions. But if you find me a decent human being, then I will take pride in that. For that is what these great men have taught. The Prophet's teachings were not exclusivist teachings, nor inclusivists. You see, theology has been categorized into these nonsensical terms where theology doesn't belong. It's either exclusivist, that my religion is the right one, yours is wrong. This is an ungodly statement. Or they are either inclusivist, which is a statement of arrogance, that my religion allows for your success. How dare anyone have that arrogance to say, oh man, me and you are upon a speck of dust in this vast universe. Do you know this? In our own galaxy, the earth is not found. We don't even know where we are. Upon this speck of dust, there are 7 billion equal microbes here that are fighting in the name of God for the truth. God must be laughing or lamenting at our state and saying, is this there are? Do they not look above them? I have created endless galaxies and they're on a little speck of dust trying to fight over my name. Is this how human life is being wasted? Seriously? This is not what the prophets taught. They did not talk about exclusivism nor inclusivism. They were truly, in the truest sense, pluralists. The Prophet taught that he who does good shall have good. He who does evil shall have evil. There is no other distinction. He says you are either godly or you're ungodly. You can't be otherwise. If you're a Muslim, you're ungodly, then there's no distinction between you and an ungodly person. Your designation of Islam does not mean anything. This is what the Prophet teaches in the Quran. Look at the excellent way in which this man was, and all other great men that went before him. He taught, he said, we believe in everything revealed unto us. And he said to the Christians and the Jews, we believe in everything revealed unto you. Your God and our God is one God. The Quran commanded him, O Muhammad, say to the people of the book, come together on that which binds us together, namely the worship of one God and non-association of others with God. And then he said, the Quran repeats this twice, and the Quran is replete with these verses. Say, the faithful, the Jews, the Christians, the Sabians, they all stand at the same pedestal. Whoever amongst them believes in God, the last day, and commits righteous acts, they will have their reward, and no fear shall befall them, and no harm shall come upon them. This was the pluralistic message of Muhammad Rasulullah. No different from the message of every true torchbearer of human spirit before him. Show me a distinction. In fact, how broad was this man? He taught sacredness of life. Find me one verse of the Quran out within its own context that ordains to an act which is inhumane. For me, it doesn't matter whether a person calls themselves Muslim, Christian, secularist, religious. If they are not abiding by human values, then they are wrong. And if a person abides by human values and there is God centricity, then they are attaining the purpose of godliness. The Prophet taught, he said, be good for the sake of good, but if you can be good for the sake of being godly, then that is even better. Today's world talks about human morals that give charity for the sake of giving charity. These great prophets taught, give charity for the sake of giving charity, not for the sake of any reward. But if you can, then prefer the other over you in order to become God-like. Become godly within yourself and spread this godliness. He taught the sacredness of life. He liberated people. One of the most universal verses of the Quran is like Raha fid Din. There is no compulsion within religion. And how can there be compulsion in religion? How can there ever be compulsion in religion? Why doesn't the Muslim mind understand this? He taught about the truth beyond religion. Islam, the word in the Quran, has never been used favorably to depict a formalized faith. Do you know this? Islam within the Quran has always been used in the context of Abraham, Jesus, Moses, David, Sulaiman, Yaqub, Joseph, to mean sincere surrender to that principle of beauty known as God. That's how Islam has been used in the Quran in a favorable sense. It's been used to depict a formal religion, and Allah has frowned upon it in 2 instances. The word Islam does not mean what me and you have understood in any case. Just as I will say to my dear brother Christians and the Jews, your religions don't mean what you have understood. It's far beyond that. Muhammad did not become an end in himself. He said, I am a mere means on my own journey to godliness. It's your relationship with God. You have a great beauty vested inside you. Unveil it and find it. He taught there is no compulsion in religion. But more than that, this is the most striking verse in the Quran. At the conquest of Mecca, when this man stands upon 1,000,000 miles of land, having created a brotherhood, having created what he called an ummah, and do you know what it comprised of? Who it comprised of? Of the Muslims, of the Christians, of the Jews, of the pagans. And do you know the dynamics of this ummah? He allowed for every people to adhere to their law in resolving their own problems and yet be united on the common grounds of mutual benefit and adding to each other. He was a pluralist and a liberal as well. This man stands in Mecca at the height of glory, but is uncorrupted. Born into poverty and as an orphan, he stands as a poor man. Now, he recites this verse. Think about this verse, O Muslims, O Christians, Jews, whoever you want to call yourselves. May God make us beyond and above and transcend these designations that are so limiting. He recited this verse. O people, we have created you of a man and of a woman. We have made you into tribes and nations, so that by mutual interaction, you may begin to realize that the best among you is one who is most God conscious of you. He puts aside differences of religion altogether. The address is to mankind as a whole. My 20 minutes are up, so I'm going to finish and begin to conclude, even though I know you don't want me to sit down. Why would you have to laugh at that point? You could have at least just nodded your heads and let me feel happy about it. But anyway, the truth has to come out because you're truthful people. Even at the peak of battle, the Orientalist write that he came to a people who were undisciplined. Even in battle, when the sound of prayer was called, they would stand in rows and worship Allah. He brought discipline into undisciplined people, even within the battlefield. Even at the peak of rage, this man did not move away from his lofty, godly morals. In the Battle of Badr, when the enemies, the Meccans, fled, leaving behind their dead, the Prophet went and he said, bury these people. They said, Muhammad, these are your enemies, the enemies of God, the enemies of the religion. He said, they are humans. They deserve a dignified burial. From those teachings to Muslims decapitating each other in the name of Islam and killing Christians and Jews, imagine. Where have we gone? Now, I will conclude with one thing that I find in the Book of God. And I invite you all to think into this very carefully, regardless of our persuasions and backgrounds. You will find that the Quran talks of a very different story of truth to the one that we are acquainted with from our cradles and indoctrination. The Quran states, religion has always ever been one religion. The religion in which there is God-human centricity that brings about the best in humanity. And there is collective destiny. That's the only religion. That is what the Quran speaks of. The Quran says there's always only been one revelation. And then it states to us, and this stands to reason, that that same religion has been expressed differently in different contexts. And the same revelation has been received differently in different contexts. If you want to look at Islam, then Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they are all Islam. If you want to look at the revelation, then Torah, Injil, Quran, they are one revelation. Look at the Quran very closely and you will find this truth, a salient truth. There is only one truth. It's the human, godly truth. We are one family, one blood, one soul, one people. It's a shame today the world talks about tolerating the other. How nonsensical is this? It's not a question of tolerating the other. It's not even a question of accepting the other. It's a question of appreciating the other. For the other is a reflection of my own being in his or her context. And he is displaying the gems of godliness through which I take pride. That is the absolute truth. The Prophet Muhammad left his community at a pedestal that if we witness the history of Jerusalem, whenever the Muslims have occupied Jerusalem, historically, as I say, I don't take pride in being a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or anything, but this is a historical fact, that whenever the Muslims occupied Jerusalem, Christians and the Jews flourished. When the Christians occupied Jerusalem, obviously, The other two were persecuted, and whenever the Jews occupied Jerusalem, we can see what is happening. I dare say if the Muslims were to occupy Jerusalem today, they might do the same as what others are doing as well, because we've all moved away from the lofty pedestals of the great masters and the torchbearers of the human spirit. I will invite us here at this point to look within ourselves and to do justice to these great men of history who are no less than our fathers and mothers. Bid you all peace. May Allah, God, be with us all. Thank you.